The first proposition that they make is that we should treat the reality that we're dealing with as psychologists, we should treat human experience as that reality. And so the reality for you, from a phenomenological perspective, is everything you experience. They assume everything you experience is real, and they also assume that you can't actually get more real than that. And so your consciousness, whatever that is real, and your dreams are real, and your emotions are real, and your pain is real, which is a really useful thing to think if you want to make sure that you're not going to hurt people. You know, you kind of have to think that maybe pain should be treated as a fundamental reality instead of as an epiphenomena of some material substrate. And so that's their first perspective. And they took that from Heidegger, because Heidegger thought that Western philosophy had got off on the wrong track, you know, 3,000 years ago, because we didn't really concentrate on being itself as the fundamental mystery. And so the fundamental mystery is, why the hell is there anything? And since there is something, experiential being, what are its fundamental elements? And so that's the phenomenological stance. It's not the same as a scientific approach, because it starts with a different presupposition. You know, the scientific presupposition, roughly speaking, is that things are, the objectively real elements of things are the most real elements. And there's no sense complaining about that, because it's an approach that works tremendously well for many, many things, including making hydrogen bombs, for example. But it's also reasonable to think that, well, it might not be the whole truth and nothing but the truth, and maybe you could also suspect that the fact that we can manufacture hydrogen bombs also might indicate that there's something a trifle off with our fundamental belief systems, scientific though they may be. And that was certainly something that concerned Heidegger, even though he got all tangled up with the Nazis. So the phenomenologists were trying to take apart experience as such, and they made some hypotheses and then some observations. So the first is that we're going to assume that your experience, like experience itself, is real. Now, just because dreams are real and pain is real doesn't mean, and like objects that we can all perceive are real, doesn't mean you should put them all in the same category. Like my dreams are not in the same category of reality as this table, because you don't have access to my dreams and you have access to the table. But that doesn't mean that my dreams and my pains and my emotions aren't real. They're real. So that's the first. Now you should note that this is a proposition. What they're saying is, let's act as if that's true, and then work from those premises and see what happens, see where we can get with it. And that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do, because at the bottom of a theory you always have to put an assumption, because otherwise your theory would be 100% right and would cover everything, and it doesn't. So you have to throw an assumption somewhere in there at the bottom and say, okay, we're not questioning that. That's the starting point. So, and you have to do that, because you're ignorant. You don't have a full theory. So they don't like the idea that mind can be reduced to matter. They're not playing that game. They're not playing the game that the subject is only epiphenomenal and the object is real. They're not playing that game either. And it's partly because, as Boss says, without a subject, nothing at all would exist to confront objects and to imagine them as such. True, this implies that every object, everything objective, is merely objective, in being merely objectivized by the subject, is the most subjective thing possible. It's a radical claim, you know. But here's something to think about. When I look at that Coke can, you might say, oh, I perceive the object, and then I make inferences about its use, and then I evaluate it, and then I use it. And, you know, that is not actually what you do. In fact, it's not obvious at all that what you perceive are objects. And if you think about it, well, people weren't perceiving scientific objects until like 1500 AD or 1450. So there was no objective object before then. So obviously whatever we were perceiving was not precisely that, because we would have been scientists right off the bat. George Kelly claimed that people were natural scientists, you know, that we're always investigating hypotheses and trying to disprove them and so on. And it's an interesting theory, and that it's right in a sense, but fundamentally it's wrong. We are not natural scientists, we're natural engineers. And when we look at the world, we don't see objects and then infer their use. What we actually see is the use. So for example, when I look at that Coke can, my visual system activates my motor cortex directly. It can do that without me seeing the damn can consciously to some degree, because there are people with blind sight. I've told you about those people. They say they can't see, but if you ask them which hand you have held up, they can tell you. So they might not be able to see, but they can map patterns from their visual system onto their motor output. You know, and that's basically what Piaget said we do when we deal with the world. We're embodied creatures, you know. And so what we see when we look around aren't objects. They're things we can use and things that get in our way. You know, and that's a theory that was derived originally from J.J. Gibson, who wrote a great book on that called The Visual Approach to Ecological Approach to Visual Perception. And his science is a brand of pragmatism. And the pragmatists basically claim that, you know, things, including theories and perceptions, have a limited range of truth, and the truth the limited range of truth is determined by the match between your actions and the outcome. So I think this is a Coke can. Is that what it is? No, but it's good enough for me if I want to drink a bit of Coke out of it. God only knows what it is. You know, if you go into communist China and you start advertising these things, then what are they? Because this thing tells a story, right? What's the story? Like, really, do you need Coca-Cola? No. It's like, it's a bit of frippery, you know, it's an unnecessary luxury. It's not even very good for you. But it's kind of fuzzy and it's sweet and you get to buy it. And why is that? Because no matter how stupid you are in your nutrition choices, as far as our society goes, you have the right to poison yourself in whatever way you think best befits you. And so when you send this little Coke can off to communist China, this thing screams stupid individuality all over. And God only knows how it undermines the state. You know, and if you're not thinking about that, you're not thinking. Think about what happens when we export cars. What does a car say? It says, hey, you can go wherever you want, whenever you want, you don't have to tell anybody at all. And you can do it in a really dangerous, high-speed manner. It's like, you want a political statement? Wrap it up in metal and ship that thing off. And everybody goes, whoa, I'd really like to have one of those. It's like, poof, communism disappears with that. You know, there's nothing that says individuality and capitalism like a personal automobile. You know, you even get to pollute the atmosphere and ruin the planet with the damn thing. But, you know, if you have to drive to the corner store and pick up your damn Coke, it's like, to hell with the atmosphere.